$8,000 a month. One backyard. No employees, no storefront, no commercial license visible from the street, and no indication whatsoever to anyone walking past that what sits behind that fence is generating more monthly income than most American households earn from a full-time job. The neighbors wave when they see the owner outside. They assume it is a well-maintained garden. They have no idea that what they are looking at is 7 income systems running simultaneously, each one feeding the next, each one quietly eliminating the operating costs of the others, stacked into a quarter acre that looks from every angle like someone who enjoys gardening a little more than average. Most people walk past setups like this every single day and see nothing unusual. A fence, some raised beds, a shed in the back corner, maybe a few birds if they look closely enough. What they do not see is the biological logic connecting every element. The way the waste from one system becomes the food supply for another. The way 7 operations that look like separate hobbies are actually one machine with 7 moving parts that cannot be separated without the whole thing losing efficiency. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly how that machine works. Every system, the exact monthly income range each one produces, the real startup cost, and the single mistake that quietly ends each system before the income ever materializes. Because every system on this list has one specific failure point that kills it at the beginning if you do not know it is coming. And knowing it in advance is the difference between a system that compounds and one that costs you money and nothing else. The last system on this list is the one that genuinely stops people when they hear the income number. Stay through it because it is also the one that makes everything else more profitable by cleaning up after all of them. System 1 is the foundation that the entire operation runs on, and it lives in a shed, costs less than a dinner out to launch, and earns between $400 and $700 every single month, while requiring 20 minutes of daily attention. Mealworms. The reaction most people have to that word is the reason most people are not running this system. Mealworms are the larvae of the darkling beetle. They live in stacked plastic storage bins on a standard wire shelving unit. They eat wheat bran, oats, and the vegetable scraps your kitchen generates every day, which means the raw material input cost is functionally zero after the initial substrate purchase. They produce no sound, they produce no odor when the substrate is kept dry, and from those same bins, without any additional input, you pull 3 completely separate, sellable products simultaneously. Live worms sell to reptile owners, bird rehabilitators, and fishing bait buyers at $5 to $12 per 100 count, purchased locally or shipped in breathable packaging. Dried worms run through a basic food dehydrator, sell to backyard chicken keepers and bird feeder enthusiasts at $15 to $25 per pound as a high-protein feed supplement. And frass, the organic waste produced by the colony, sells to organic gardeners at $2 to $4 per pound as a balanced soil amendment comparable to premium worm castings. One colony, 3 separate buyer markets. 0 additional input required to produce all 3 products from the same population of animals in the same bins. The income range of $400 to $700 monthly is achievable from a setup occupying one wall of a standard backyard shed across 22 to 30 stacked bins. The material cost running that setup runs $50 to $70 per month in bran and occasional substrate refresh. Everything else the system consumes comes from the kitchen and garden waste the backyard already generates. The stack connection that makes mealworms the foundation, rather than just one of 7 systems, is the role they play in feeding every bird system on this list. Live worms that do not sell in a given week go directly into the feed supply for the quail operation and the guinea fowl described later. That single internal transfer reduces purchased feed costs across those 2 bird systems by 30 to 50%, which means the mealworm operation is not only generating its own income, but subsidizing the operating costs of 2 other systems simultaneously. Remove the mealworms, and every bird system on this list gets more expensive immediately. Startup runs $40 to $80 for 4 initial bins, wheat bran substrate, and a starter colony of breeding adults from an online insect supplier. The single mistake that ends most beginner mealworm operations is temperature neglect. Mealworms slow reproduction dramatically below 70 degrees Fahrenheit and stop entirely in a cold shed through winter months. A programmable space heater costing $30 protects a system generating $500 monthly from going completely dormant for 4 months of the year. That is the cheapest insurance available for any income system on this list. System 2 goes vertical rather than horizontal, generates $600 to $900 monthly from a footprint smaller than a bedroom dresser, and is legal in residential zones where every other poultry option has been explicitly banned. Coturnix quail. The legal architecture that makes quail viable where chickens are prohibited is a single classification difference. Coturnix quail are game birds under virtually every municipal code in the country. Game bird classifications exist entirely outside the livestock and poultry ordinances that suburban municipalities wrote specifically to eliminate backyard chickens from residential neighborhoods. Your HOA that has a specific provision banning chickens almost certainly has no language covering a 6-ounce game bird that produces no audible sound beyond a soft call that does not carry past the fence line. A Coturnix hen begins laying at 6 weeks of age and produces 250 to 300 eggs per year at peak performance. 60 laying hens housed in 3 stacked cages against a single shed wall, occupying a footprint smaller than a standard parking space, generate 30 to 40 dozen eggs per week at peak laying efficiency. Quail eggs at farmers markets, specialty grocers, and through direct pre-order lists sell for $5 to $8 per dozen. Hatching eggs sold to backyard keepers starting their own flocks move at $25 to $40 per dozen through online platforms. Dressed birds sold to restaurants on standing weekly orders generate $4 to $6 per bird from the male surplus that a laying flock produces naturally without requiring separate production planning. The feed connection to the mealworm system underneath it is direct and immediate. Live worms from the bins that did not move as retail product go into the quail feeders multiple times per week. The protein content of live mealworms exceeds the protein specification of commercial layer feed, which means the quail receiving worm supplementation 3 to 4 times weekly require measurably less purchased pellet feed to maintain peak laying performance. The feed bill for 60 quail on a mealworm supplemented program runs $20 to $30 monthly, compared to $60 to $80 on a commercial pellet-only program. The mealworm bin is paying the quail's grocery bill, and the quail are paying the backyard's utility costs. Startup for the complete 60 bird system runs $150 to $300 for stacked wire caging, feeders, waterers, and starting birds or hatching eggs. The single mistake that ends most new quail operations before they reach consistent production is sourcing adult birds from an outside operation and expecting immediate laying performance. Adult quail purchased from another facility arrive stressed from transport and the unfamiliar environment, and frequently stop laying for 2 to 4 weeks while they adjust. Birds raised from hatching eggs or day-old chicks in your own space from their first week of life imprint on the environment, settle into a calm routine, and begin laying on the normal developmental timeline without the stress-induced production gap that adult purchases create. Raise the flock you intend to profit from, rather than purchasing someone else's established flock and expecting it to perform in a new location. System 3 moves off the shelf and into a room with tanks, and it is where the income per square foot of this backyard starts becoming genuinely difficult to believe until you trace the math. Ornamental shrimp. Income range, $700 to $1,500 monthly from a shelving unit holding 5 10-gallon tanks in a space 3 feet wide and 6 feet tall. Neocaridina and Caridina shrimp are the small, jewel-colored freshwater shrimp sold in aquarium stores for $3 to $8 each. What the retail price tag does not communicate is how aggressively these animals reproduce under the right water conditions. A single 10-gallon planted tank housing 30 breeding adults at correct parameters produces 60 to 120 offspring monthly at peak reproduction without any intervention beyond maintaining water quality and providing food. One tank generating 90 offspring monthly at a conservative $4 wholesale price to a local fish store produces $360 in monthly revenue from a container that sits on a single shelf position and costs $3 to $5 monthly to feed. 5 tanks on one shelving unit produce 5 times that output from a footprint most spare rooms have available without displacing any existing use of the space. The selective breeding program that takes this system from $700 monthly to $1,500 or beyond is the component that multiplies per animal revenue without adding production costs. A standard cherry red Neocaridina sells wholesale at $2 to $3. The identical species, selectively bred across 2 to 3 generations toward a clean, deep blue or high-grade crystal pattern, sells to serious hobbyists at $15 to $40 per animal. The genetics are the product. The shrimp are the delivery mechanism. Building a reputation for a specific clean color line with documented breeding outcomes creates a buyer community that purchases from you specifically rather than from any available source, which eliminates price competition entirely from your sales model. The water change connection that integrates System 3 into the broader backyard operation is the detail most shrimp keepers discard without understanding what they are throwing away. Tank water removed during weekly water changes carries dissolved ammonia, nitrates, and organic compounds that represent exactly the fertility profile that garden beds require for productive vegetable growth. Running that water change output onto raised beds rather than down a drain means the shrimp system is simultaneously irrigating and fertilizing the garden that feeds the snail operation coming 3 systems from now. The shrimp are paying the garden's fertilizer bill while generating income from tank space that would otherwise sit unused. Startup runs $100 to $250 for tank infrastructure, filtration, substrate, a remineralization kit for proper water parameters, and starting shrimp from a reputable source. The mistake that ends the majority of beginner shrimp operations in the first 30 days is adding animals before water parameters are verified and stable. Caridina and Neocaridina shrimp die rapidly in improperly mineralized water, and the die-off that results from adding animals to uncycled or incorrectly parameterized water convinces most beginners that shrimp are too difficult to keep at scale. A $20 TDS meter and a basic remineralization routine verified across 2 weeks before the first animal enters the tank prevents every version of that failure entirely. 3 systems running, and the financial logic of the stack is already becoming visible. The mealworms are feeding the quail and reducing that system's operating costs by half. The shrimp tanks are irrigating the garden that the next system depends on for its raw material supply. Every output from every system is moving toward something else rather than toward the trash. That is the design principle that makes $8,000 possible from a quarter acre, and the 4 remaining systems are where the income climbs and the logic of the machine becomes impossible to dismiss. System 4 is a 5-star restaurant delicacy that France has charged premium prices for since the 1600s, grows in a plastic bin in a garage corner, produces 0 noise, 0 odor, and requires 0 permits anywhere in the country. Escargot snails. Income range $400 to $800 monthly from 2 bins occupying less floor space than a kitchen trash can. The species is Helix aspersa, the common garden snail that also happens to be the most widely farmed escargot variety in the world. A 5-gallon bin maintained at 65 to 75 degrees with 80% humidity and a coconut coir substrate comfortably houses 200 to 300 breeding adults. A single adult Helix aspersa lays 80 to 100 eggs per clutch multiple times annually, which means the colony renews and expands itself continuously without any restocking cost after initial purchase. You start with 200 animals, and the population compounds from that point forward without additional investment. The dual market structure that makes this system genuinely attractive is the ability to sell the identical product into 2 completely separate buyer pools at 2 different price points simultaneously. Live snails sold through specialty food distributors move at $8 to $14 per pound. Live snails sold directly to a restaurant chef on a standing weekly contract move at $18 to $22 per pound for the same product. The difference between those two prices is the difference between a distribution relationship where someone else captures the margin and a direct chef relationship where you capture it yourself. Walking into the back entrance of 3 upscale restaurants in any mid-size American city with a sample container and one question, "Do you have a reliable local escargot supplier?" produces the answer no in almost every case, because local escargot supply simply does not exist in most American markets. That conversation converts into a standing weekly order faster than almost any other direct sales relationship in specialty food. Because the demand is established, the supply is absent, and you are the only person standing in the gap. The garden integration is immediate. Snails eat vegetable trimmings, bolted greens, carrot tops, outer cabbage leaves, and the organic waste the rest of the backyard generates that no other system consumes. The garden's waste stream becomes the snail colony's primary feed supply at zero cost. The highest margin system per pound of product on this list runs almost entirely on what would otherwise go to compost. Startup runs $50 to $120 for bins, substrate, a hydrometer for humidity monitoring, and breeding stock. The mistake that ends most beginner snail operations is overcrowding combined with overfeeding in the early establishment period. Dense populations with excess organic material develop parasitic infections within 2 weeks that collapse the colony before it ever reaches productive scale. Start with 50 breeding adults, learn the feeding rhythm across 60 days, then expand. Patience in the first cycle protects every production cycle that follows. System 5 sells a service rather than a product and earns $300 to $600 monthly from birds the neighbors consider a pleasant addition to the neighborhood aesthetic. Guinea fowl running a tick control service on adjacent properties while simultaneously producing specialty eggs that sell at premium prices from the same flock. Guinea fowl share the game bird classification that makes Coturnix quail legally invisible to suburban livestock ordinances. They hunt actively, consuming hundreds to thousands of ticks daily while ranging a property. In tick-endemic regions covering most of the eastern United States, property owners are currently paying $150 to $300 per visit for chemical tick control services. A standing monthly tick patrol agreement with neighboring property owners delivers the equivalent service chemically free, quietly, and on a recurring contract that generates income without requiring any additional birds, any additional feed, or any additional management beyond opening and closing a gate on schedule. Specialty eggs from the laying hens add $90 to $150 monthly in farmers market and direct sales revenue on top of the service income. The mealworm connection reduces feed costs for the guinea flock by the same mechanism it reduces quail feed costs. The birds range the garden, controlling pest pressure that would otherwise damage the vegetables feeding the snail system. Every function the guinea fowl performs benefits something else in the backyard simultaneously. System 6 is the one that stops people when they hear the income figure and makes them rewind to confirm they heard correctly. Isopods, rare color morph breeding cultures sold to the bioactive terrarium hobby market at $50 to $200 per starter culture of 10 to 15 animals. Income range, $1,500 to $3,000 monthly from a closet smaller than a coat rack holding 30 cultures on wire shelving. A single culture doubles in population every 6 to 8 weeks. Every culture you sell is replaced by the colony's natural reproduction at no cost. The inventory compounds while it sits on the shelf. A culture unsold this month is a larger, more valuable culture next month. No spoilage, no harvest timing pressure, no mortality risk from waiting. The product appreciates passively between sales, and the colony funds its own expansion without any input beyond decaying leaf litter and a weekly pinch of fish food. The waste processing function completes the loop. Isopods consume the spent substrate, organic waste, and decomposing material from every other system in the backyard and convert it into finished soil amendment that returns to the garden beds. The highest earning system on the list is simultaneously the sanitation department for all 6 systems beneath it. Total the income across all 7 systems at conservative mid-range estimates, and the machine produces $8,000 monthly from a quarter acre that reads as a garden to everyone outside the fence. The mealworms feed the birds and reduce 2 systems' operating costs by half. The shrimp tanks irrigate and fertilize the garden. The garden feeds the snails. The guinea fowl protect the garden while earning service income from neighboring properties. The isopods process everything and return it to the soil that grows the food the entire system runs on. Start with the mealworms. Under $80 to launch, 20 minutes daily. First sellable product within 60 days. Foundation for 3 other systems from day 1. Let the mealworms fund the quail. Let the quail fund the shrimp. Build outward 1 system at a time until the loop closes. That is how a backyard becomes an $8,000 machine without ever looking like anything more than a garden someone tends with unusual dedication. A.